Great. Good evening, everyone. It is September 9th, 2014, and it is it's after 7 p.m., but it is time for our work session of the North Kingstown School Committee. So if everyone could please rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lorraine, if you could please call the roll.
Linda Avanzado. John Biscardin.
Here.
Larry Cerisi.
Here.
Cheryl Clarkin. Here. Robert Jones.
Here.
William Mudge.
Here.
Kimberly Page.
Here.
Julia Held.
Here.
Thank you.
Lorraine, if you could please go over the calendars.
September 22nd, Facilities Subcommittee meeting, Central Administration Building. September 23rd, School Committee Business Meeting, 7 p.m., North Kingstown High School. October 1st, CLAC meeting, 6 p.m., North Kingstown High School Band Room. October 13th, Columbus Day, schools and offices closed. October 14th, School Committee Work Session, 7 p.m., North Kingstown High School. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any presentations or recognitions?
I guess I'd just like to recognize our health department and our wellness committee in the district. You know, I sent something out on the listserv. I think a lot of people are aware of this now, but it's worth saying at a school committee meeting that I received a phone call from Commissioner Gist inviting me on behalf of the North Kingstown School Department to be a part of a roundtable discussion of superintendents taking place at the White House next week on the subject of health, nutrition, and fitness. And that's a very big deal. I'm very excited about it personally, but also extremely proud of the efforts in the North Kingstown School Department on behalf of our PE department, our nursing staff, our wellness committee, working together for wellness, chemical health, people that look out for that end of things, people who run community events like the NK 5K. It really is a community that is very health-minded in so many different ways, and so a lot of credit goes to so many people in the district who are responsible for those programs.
All right, thank you, Dr. O'Shea. You have to make sure you take some pictures for our website. So
Certainly will.
Should we recognize the student?
Yes. Yes. So the other people we have here with us tonight are, we have two of our three new school committee reps. They are juniors. We have Sienna Mobley, who is, I guess, on her way. We also have Allie Lindo and Kaya Holbogen. Am I pronouncing it last name? Holbogen. Okay, something close. So we thank you. We welcome you here tonight. We appreciate the next 2 years that you're going to serve with us on a rotating basis, and we really appreciate your service. So, as I said, we welcome you, and I understand only one of you will be staying tonight, so whenever the other one of you needs to leave, that's okay. So, thank you. All right, that brings us to citizens' comments. No, we don't have anybody signed up. We don't have anybody signed up for citizens' comment. Is there anyone who is here who would wanted to comment and you just didn't get to sign up? All right. Seeing no one leaping up, I will move on to superintendent's report.
I'm all set with that tonight.
All right. That brings us to routine items, to the consent agenda. So for the consent agenda, are there items that school committee members would like to exempt? Mr. Mudge.
A, B, C3, and D.
All right.
D, Mr. Mudge, D as in personnel items?
D as in dog.
I had some questions on most of them.
All right, so that is C1 and 2, I believe that leaves us with. So do I have a motion to approve C1 and 2? Mr. Cerisi?
I have a motion to approve the entire consent agenda with the exception of D2.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
second.
All right, so Mr. Mudge has asked us to exempt a number of things, but Mr. Cerisi, I'm saying this out loud, has asked us to approve the entire agenda except for D2, and I have a second on Mr. Cerisi's motion. Is there any further discussion?
I'd like to make a point.
Yes, Mr. Mudge.
Mrs. Page, you're a lawyer, and you're responsible for the conduct of this meeting. In addition, you know that any items that an individual wants to have exempted must be exempted.
Do you really want to discuss conduct at meetings, Mr. Mudge? Do you really want to discuss
I'm
conduct
going
at
to talk
meetings?
about what your comments were last week when I was
Let's first make sure we're discussing the
Yeah.
motion on the table. We have a motion to approve or not to approve. So let's make sure that we contain our discussion to the motion.
The legal argument, if you may, would be Robert's rules. Anybody who wants to make an exemption can make an exemption to the meeting. We've gone over this 100 times before, and you've allowed this to happen before, Mrs. Page, which is completely unethical, but if you want to do that again, go ahead.
So this is the dilemma I'm in. I do believe that while I like Mr. Cerisi's motion, I'm a little bit, like, I do think that if motions or things are exempted from Robert's rules, that we are supposed to exempt them. That is my dilemma here tonight, in that I would rather be in and out more quickly. And so that is why I am faltering, Mr. Cerisi. It is not anything against your motion. Like I said, I would like to just vote these things down, but it is true under Robert's rules that we should discuss the
I'll
exempted
withdraw
things.
my motion.
Well, that's
All right.
terrific. After 4 years, you finally recognize that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mudge. I would like if you would contain your comments just to what you wanted to discuss and not make personal jabs.
Oh, it's
So,
all right for other numbers to do
A1,
that, isn't it?
Mr.
You allow other
actually,
numbers to do that?
Mr. Mudge, you wanted to discuss A1.
Yes, my question on A1 is simple. Regarding homeschooling, do these kids that take homeschooling, are they required to take all the same tests that our kids take in terms of kneecaps and all the other tests?
No.
They're not?
No.
Okay, do I
That
have?
seems, isn't that kind of, this is academically a question, so.
It's not my law. It's the law. It's not my rule. I didn't make it, but they're not required.
That seems incredibly inappropriate. I know it's not your fault, Dr. Ogier, if that's the case. But I seem to think that it's, given the fact that we are responsible to oversee even the homeschooling in terms of books and everything else, that there should be an end result of that as well. And I would ask, and I'm just suggesting this again, is we ought to have some sort of a yardstick to say, gee, how are these kids achieving, with these tests and, all the kneecaps and all, the state regulations and everything else, how are they performing? If nothing else, as a yardstick. So thank you for that answer, because I think it's really troubling.
All right, do I have a motion to approve A? Mr.
Yeah, motion to approve item A.
Do I have a second? Second. Yes, Mr.
Just quick follow-up, Dr. J. Are we required, to automatically approve, I know they come, so automatically approve those, or is there some sort of due diligence the state requires, or?
I'm going to let Dr. Humbert talk about that. That's an assistant superintendent's office item.
So there's very little criteria except what subjects the students need to cover. And then at the end of the year, the documentation is how the progress went as reported by the parent and how many days of attendance there was. But that's the entire criteria.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to approve A. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, we didn't do the consent, the non-exempted items.
Right.
So I'll make a motion at this time to approve the non-exempted consent items.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Berglund. Okay, that brings us to item B, minutes approval. Do I have a motion to approve B?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Mudge, you exempted B?
Yes, I had a question in enclosure on B. There's a monthly financial report for the month of August, July.
Well, you can't bring up the discussion of the financial report at this time, Mr. Mudge. It's merely a motion to approve the minutes. So you either approve the minutes or you don't, but we don't go back and revisit a report that was in the last minutes.
Well, I think the information is relevant to, I should have a discussion.
No, then you should have stayed for the meeting and you should have asked the question at some other time, but we don't revisit what was in the last the set of minutes. We don't revisit the agenda items. Mr. Jones.
Just request this be a roll call vote, so I can abstain, please.
Okay. All right, if there's no further discussion, if we can, or actually, Mr. Jones, you can just give your abstention. All those in favor of approving item B, say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Abstain.
And abstain.
Abstain.
Great, thank you very much. All right, that brings us to C3. Do I have a motion to approve C3?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Mudge, you asked to.
Yeah, I had a lot of questions on that. I noticed that this is going to be a full-time trainer on-site for practices and in all school games.
It's going to be for school games, yes. And it's not an employee, it is a contractor.
Well, if it's not an employee, it's, well, we're just talking about the contractor's responsibilities, which I looked at. And in there, it says, we'll have this athletic trainer, basically medical supervisor, if you may, at the games, possibly, depending on the trainer's schedule and or whatever, which is disconcerting to me. Now, this doesn't mean that, for example, we'll have these trainers on games that are away games or anything like that. I assume that away games are not in there.
There are agreements across the district where there's a trainer at all key games, and it could be the other team's trainer is available at an away game. At the North Kingstown game, be our trainer.
I kind of support, I do support this, but I'm concerned that, it's like going halfway. Either we should have these medical trained people here at all practices, okay? We're talking, $15,000 a year, okay? And it would seem to me, whether I have a football game or I have a football practice or a football scrimmage, the same conditions are prevalent that, might cause injury and so forth and so on. And I would like to know what sports these are kind of directed to.
I can get back to you on that.
Well, it's like it says here, practice, coverage will be determined by the athletic director and the athletic trainer, and will be typically included daily coverage on varsity and non-varsity sports. This coverage will be based on injury risk of the sport and other mutually agreed upon factors. Well, I'd like to know what those conditions are, and I think we should know what those conditions are before we approve this. There's some other things in here that are selected contests will be covered based on risks, okay? And the availability of the athletic trainer during a particular sports session. You know, I'd like to see some more specificity with regard to this before we go ahead and approve this thing.
Those are all things that the athletic director will take care of at his discretion.
Well, I don't
When
want
he
him to
believes-
take care of it at his discretion. If we're going to have coverage, I think we ought to have the coverage outlined, that like for football, if we want a trainer on site all the time, then fine, let's do that. But let's not, you know, if we have a JV game, or if we have another game, we should know what the extent and how far this does extend.
Yeah, yes, we do have a motion on the table and a second.
Call the question, please.
Yes, we can call the question. All right, all those in favor of approving C3, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
I'm going to approve it reluctantly.
Great, motion carries. Okay, that brings us down to the personnel items under D. Mr. Mudge has asked all these be exempted, so I'm going to go through them and ask for a motion first, and then we can discuss them. So
that may not be-
D1, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Mudge. This is the increase to the certified staff. Being moved from
The,
.7 to .8.
Are we basically at the hiring level now? Basically, that was my question here on the mathematics teacher, the hiring of the mathematics teacher. And is this an addition? This is, you know, we have, doesn't make any comment about funding here.
It's within budget.
I didn't note that there.
And it's within budget and within the assigned FTEs that the school committee approved at budget season last year.
It says right on the agenda reporting form, financial impact budgeted.
Doesn't say it here on the backup sheet, so that's what I'm looking at. Thank you.
All right, all those in favor of D1, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. D2, do I have a motion?
Actually, I'd like to offer a motion to table D2 at this time. I spoke to Dr. Roger just prior to starting tonight's meeting, and I just have some questions and some additional information that I was looking for prior to discussing and voting on this, and no fault of Dr. Roger's, fault of my own that I had not requested this information at an earlier time. So I think Dr. Roger had mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, that he was okay if we table this until our next meeting, and I have an opportunity to get that information and, of course, forward it to the rest of the committee as well. So if there's no objections, I'd just like to offer a motion to table this until our next meeting.
Second.
Yes, Mr. Jones?
I thank Mr. Stracey for bringing this up. I did have a question. I also failed to ask the superintendent about it, so maybe I can just piggyback on Mr. Stracey's thing. It may be the same thing. So just either can provide it to him and you, or directly, and it can be provided to the whole committee as well, which may be of interest. Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor
Can I
to
just
table
make
this
a
item.
comment, please?
Yes?
As long as we're going to suspend this for a week, which is fine, or 2 weeks is fine. I would like the issue addressed on a co-mentor coordinator. Where is this money coming from? And I know it's a small amount. And how many positions like this are we funding in totality?
I don't believe that's D2.
That's D5.
The motion is to table D2.
I beg your pardon. I was on.
Yeah, D2 is a grant-funded position. All right, we can figure that out later. So
Yeah,
we have
let
said,
him- yeah,
we have
let
said
him leave
the
through
motion
this
is to
crap.
table this item, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. D3, do I have a motion to approve D3?
identified.
So moved.
Second.
So a motion on the floor. Mr. Mudge, you asked to exempt D3.
Yeah. No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of approving D3, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Motion to approve D4.
So moved.
Second.
So motion and a second. Mr. Mudge, you asked to exempt D4.
Yeah, I guess that was the one I was referring to regarding, staffing, which has already been answered. I'm sorry, I'm out of position here. No comment?
Okay, all those in favor of approving D4, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Were there any not to pass D4? Okay. D5, the Teacher Assistant Mentor Coordinator. Is there a motion to approve D5?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Mudge, you asked to exempt D5.
Yeah, that was the comment again, is the funding, and is identified in our budget someplace. I don't believe I've seen that before, and just like there's some accountability on that.
It is budgeted. It is an item that we've done before, and it is a contractual item with ESP.
Yeah. Is there a budget line item for that?
The ESP salaries.
Under ESP.
I'm just wondering, if we have a position, I would assume we'd have a budget line item for that.
We have a budget line item for all of our positions. I can get you the object number if you'd like.
Well, again, not just the odds, but I'd like to get the UCOA number for those.
I'll get right on that.
All right, do I have if there are no further questions, all those in favor of approving D5, say aye.
Aye.
Motion, all those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, D6, do I have a motion to approve D6?
So moved.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mudge, you asked to exempt D6. This is the intramural.
I kind of looking at this, and I'm saying to myself, it seems to be selected people here, doing all the intramural director, the wiffle ball, dodgeball, ultimate frisbee, flag ball, handball tournaments and stuff like that. I don't know, what we're doing, but I notice we have the same coaches here all the time. And my comment really is, with respect to this, again, this is on the intramurals.
Right.
Actually, what I think we should be saying is thank goodness we have these people, because these are usually the only people who sign up, and without these people who commit their time and their energy, many of these would not run, and our students would not have the good experience on the intramurals that they have.
Where could I get a list of all the intramural sports we have,
I'll get right on that, too.
please?
Basically, you have it in front of you.
In front of you.
That's what we have. That's the entire year.
Is
Intramural.
that for the high school too, and the other one?
High school doesn't have intramurals.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Jones and then Mr. Busgarden.
I want to make just one comment and point out that, this along with the coaching thing being the result of the work done by the negotiating team and the administration and leadership to sort of bring all these into consensus and allow us to afford these. So just wanted to make that point, that we're starting to see the results from that, and from our, obviously from our teachers and staff who worked also to agree to that. The second point would be is perhaps, Dr. Zay, at the end of the year or something, from the schools, we can sort of get maybe just a list of participation numbers so we get a sense of how popular, not popular, involved in the we always talk athletics, but the co-curricular stuff to get a sense of participation and student engagement in those clubs and intramurals and other activities might be helpful.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Busgarden.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Dr. Ogier, we discussed this last year, and I asked for some information, and you never got it to me. I requested over a year ago, and partly my fault because I didn't follow up on it, but I wanted to know where, I want to know the rules for capture the frog.
We'll work on that for you.
And also, I'm telling you, there's no such thing as Irish bocce ball. There's just no such thing. I respectfully ask that to be corrected.
I am going to work on that
Thank
tomorrow.
you. That's all I ask. Thank you.
You got it.
All right, do we have any other comments? Okay, we have a motion on the table in a second. All those in favor of approving the intramural appointments, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, do I have a motion for the resignations, to approve the resignations?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion on the floor in a second. Mr. Mudge, you want to exempt the resignations?
Yeah, just for the discussion, because I think we mentioned this before. Do we have a policy, an interview policy, an exit interview for our people that resign?
No.
I thought we talked about doing that at one time.
We have it for students who leave, although the law has now changed that you cannot leave at 16, it has to be 18. But we do have policy to have students who leave to interview them.
Yeah, don't you think it might be a good thing that maybe the policy committee should look at in terms of having exit interviews with all staff members and all our employees, and ask them, how they like being in the school system and any of the problems they might have had or not have and things like that. It would provide a lot of history for us in the future. That was just a comment, so I don't have any problem with that.
We can certainly talk about that in our agenda. Is there any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of D7, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. Okay, that brings us to unfinished business, to the policies. We have the donation policy before us today. This is not a policy for approval. This is just a first read. And so to give you a little bit of history of this policy, about 4 years ago, it was discussed that we did not have any sort of a policy regarding donations. And so Mrs. Avanzato was actually the person who spearheaded this policy and wrote this. And then I can't remember if it came up once for a initial reading or not, but because it was so long ago and it never came up for a second reading, we brought it forth to the committee at this time because of the discussion that we had a couple of meetings ago about donations. And so this is why it's being brought up today.
This is just the first read.
And this is just the first read, so I don't know if there are any questions or any observations. I did send out, we had our policy meeting on Monday morning yesterday, and we made a few corrections in that meeting. And so I sent out to the school committee what should be in your packet now, although, Mr. Mudge, if you have if you have the printed version, then you probably do not have the latest one that was amended on Monday. So, Mr. Mudge.
Yeah, there's no question we need a policy on donations, and I think that's something that we should have done a long time ago. But what's absent in this policy are at least three documents that I think we should be looking at to make sure that we're consistent with federal, state guidance and auditing guidance and so forth. And I would say the first thing we should be looking at is the town charter in terms of grant approvals and who has the authority to accept grants and doesn't. I don't necessarily agree with, but I think we ought to look at that to see if we're in compliance with the town charter. Number two, I think we need to look at the UCOA, or the regulations for UCOA, okay, that address these things. And finally, which I had given to I think the policy committee a couple of years ago, was this document here, okay, which addresses the accounting, the practices, the school districts throughout the nation. It says it's a student data handbook, elementary, secondary, handbook, handout. This is the National Center for Educational Statistics. It's put out under the auspices of the United States Department of Education. And it outlines donations, it outlines the accounting. And by the way, this book basically is the accounting manual of the UCOA system and the federal government system. And it distinguishes between fiduciary funds, non-fiduciary, governmental funds, and things like that. I think this donation policy has to look at this very clearly in terms of these regulations, especially when it comes to, a number like $100,000. If something foundation wants to, the event that a private foundation group seeks to raise $100,000 or more for a specific program event, well, suppose the program wants to raise $75,000 or $50,000, and so forth. I think it's critical that we review this policy again in terms of the current federal, and I guess guidance which is based on, the government auditing board and all the other good stuff. I think Dr. O'Shea has a copy of that, and maybe you could make it available for other members if they want to look at that. So otherwise, I'm not going to say anything else at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Metz. The only thing I would say is that, remember, any outside organization that wants to raise money, we have no control over. I mean, if they want to raise money, it only becomes our issue if they decide to give it to us.
That's not really, you may be right, but it's not really, because you didn't really focus on that, because if there's any organization or group that wants to raise money on behalf of the students or using basically the North Kingstown name, if you may, or even Wickford Middle School, anything like that. If you look at these, there's some regulation requirements that need to be addressed, is all I'm saying. Okay?
We can have our attorney take a look at the policy and give us her feedback on that.
And then there's the fact, which is really not clear in there, is once money is raised, okay, and it comes into the, quote, our financial system, who has responsibility, okay, for these funds? We have a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility for government monies, anything raised by the government, but anything that's raised by the parents or anybody else, we don't have a thing to say about, the expenditure of that money. So that's kind of all intermingles, and there's strict regulations in terms of all these funds, who's on the boards, who has the authority to authorize, these things and so forth. So again, I certainly would give this to the council, as long, and including the UCOA accounting manual for the state.
Mr. Busgarden, did you have your hand up?
Yes. I just reading it again, under the private donations to North Kingstown Schools, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think it's the fifth paragraph, which talks about how the school department and the school committee is brought into the process. It talks about the committee reserving the right to decline restricted gifts for programs that it's chosen to discontinue. Further, the school committee reserves the right to decline contributions with conditions that restrictions that are not consistent with state law, blah, 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 all other stuff. But not until you get to the public gifts to schools, it talks about the amount. So my question is does that $5,000 limit apply to paragraph 5? Because it's separate,
So it's our understanding from when we were talking in the school committee that anything times that there is, the town has stated that spending over $5,000 was something that was needed approval, and when we received gifts over that there had to be an approval by the town council, and so that is why that specific line is in there. Now, we also state in here that we had to pick an amount just to say, gee, do you want to consult with the school committee beforehand if you're raising a very large sum of money, such as we've already talked about, and we've had the boosters come and talk to us about raising a large sum of money for a track and a football field. Well, so they've already come to us and stated, oh, this is something we'd like to do, and wow, we didn't have any sort of vote. We still, tacitly said, wow, great idea. So, they would have followed this policy. Now, when it comes time for actually to be any granting of the money, that'll be a different vote because we haven't taken any votes so far. But that is the reason at the end that talks about if there's a gift to the school that's over $5,000, that it needs to have approval first.
So if somebody wants to donate, for example, the new robotics classes are start. If someone wants to donate something to that, if it's under $5,000, it doesn't come before the committee?
No.
No, it does not, or no?
If it was under $5,000, it would not come to the committee.
So there could be lots of $100 gifts coming and going, coming into the system.
Sometimes you'll have that with PTO.
gifts.
I mean, you think about the PTO gifts. I mean, at the beginning of the year at the high school PTSO asks for people for contributions. So they don't really have any fundraisers here at the high school, and so that's what they do. Now, your other PTO groups are all separate charitable organizations.
Right.
And so they wouldn't have to ask us.
I know, but I'm not talking about the PT. I'm just talking, let's say somebody wants to donate some equipment, machinery, a bender, a lathe, a metal lathe for this robotics class, some servos or whatever it takes. Somebody they want to donate, and a dollar amount is placed on it. So if it's under $5,000, it just gets donated and it never comes.
Well, it would need to come before the school committee, just like any spending doesn't need to come before the school committee if it's under $5,000. But
No.
yes, it would need to come through the superintendent because he would need to say, this is a great thing. Let's say somebody is donating a musical instrument that are commonly under that amount. Well, some of them maybe Mrs. Silvera says, yes, we would love to have another tuba, or no, we don't need another flute. That sort of thing.
We would formally accept it, and it would be documented, but it wouldn't be something that the school committee needs to approve.
Good. No, I just wanted to see where this $5,000, does it, it wasn't clear to me, and I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification on it. I don't know if it can be written any more clearly, maybe it can't, but I imagine if I was questioning it, I wouldn't be the only one that would question that.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Mr. Cardin, I had just a point like we have the purchasing rules where Mrs. Page is correct, some items under 5,000 don't come to us. But we do get a listing of expenditures just so, and not saying this happens, but just so there's a check that, someone's not donating $12,000 increments to get around giving one $12,000 donation. That kind of stuff. So I would just piggyback what Mr. Buscardin said that since Dr. Auger mentioned that we do document gifts, that maybe we could have an end-of-year summary or something like we do with the check register that just sort of catalogs the donations for the year, so we have an annual record of that. Because I agree, we don't want to be getting into, approving $100 items, but it would be nice to sort of have a roll-up of the gifts and donations just to see both that list and to see the volume of donations that the community and others provide. So if that's possible, Dr. Auger, we could maybe do that since like you said, we're already documenting the gifts. My only other concern on here is I know, the 100,000, 50, I know it's a number, it could be higher, it could be lower, as a target range, and we clearly can't dictate, what groups want to start out with. I'm just wondering if there might be some mechanism that maybe sounds less formal than a memorandum of understanding, though, that where groups can signify, this is what they're doing. I know we had, for example, the presentation about the track, but maybe there's a more electronic, simpler way where groups can indicate their intention to do things, so it's just visible to, the superintendent, and then if it raises to a level that he thinks should come to the committee, it could come to the committee. Just again, so we're saying that people don't start out on a track that eventually is going to not get approval from, or at least, right from the start won't get approval. So, again, I don't know if just the wording sounds a little onerous to say MOU and it's only suggested. Maybe there could be some simpler way of just, if groups could communicate their intent to the administration, so
Remember, it
something
does
like
say
that.
only a suggestion.
Right, and, but again, the point would be is if you're going to raise a whole lot of money, might make sense to know that the group you're giving to isn't going to turn it down. I'm just wondering, again, if there's maybe actually just simpler language of just being able to communicate an intent or something. I don't have the right wording, I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe, this is as good as it's going to get, just throwing the point out there.
I believe on one of our reports that we received, Mrs. King, doesn't one of them document as to gifts that we have received that have been given to the school committee? I thought that I saw it's like one of the things you print out of revenues that we get, and it's, from what I remember, it's certainly not a whole lot of money each year.
No, there isn't. Well, I believe, there is, I know that there's a line item on one of our finance reports that would say gifts or donation, but you're right, there isn't a heck of a lot. But what we can do is at the end of the year, so let's say, Mr. Jones, end of the fiscal year, end of the calendar year, whichever one, we can put a note that summarizes, what's gone through. There really isn't all that much,
No, I don't remember it even getting up to the amount of, was it even over $5,000? I would have said it was like a couple $100, just
Right.
from
And
what I've
and-
noticed from year to year.
One thing when you talk about dollar value also is that we don't always know the dollar value. We've just recently had a donation of a musical instrument, which, we know it's not over $5,000, but is it 500? Is it 1,000? Is it 200? So there's not going to be a dollar value on that. There'll just be a summary that so-and-so donated a such and such to this and that. So, but we can do that. Would you like that at the end of the fiscal year, Mr. Jones, or
Whatever
calendar
you
year?
think makes sense. I mean, maybe the fiscal year roll-up would sort of be, and I would thank you for that, just to also add that, the point in the policy, which I think rightly states that we're sensitive to equity and other things across the schools, that gives just another, again, check of how donations are going across schools to address any concerns the community might have in terms of that as well.
All right. Mr. Mudge?
Yeah, again, as you see, as you start this discussion, there's a lot of different things that come into consideration here. But again, I would urge you to give this to the lawyer. It's in detailed, documented on how you handle these things and how they should be handled, the overlaps with activity funds and fiduciary funds for town monies and so forth and so on, and using the school name. Also, with respect to what Mr. Garden said, I can recall, it must be 15 years ago, an individual wanted to provide computers. I think it was for Stony Lane, and they were turned down because they felt, it's unequitable because all the other schools won't have computers. So, there are those things. But there is sound guidance in here that we can use to determine this. And also, that the dollars of money and so forth, just like I thought we were going to get a presentation on the athletic field tonight. But, people can't go out, especially teachers and administrators, and start raising money for a function without really going through through the school committee, getting their endorsement. And I'm not saying that, that's what the Gatsby regulations are saying. And finally is whether it's, 4,000 or 3,000 or 30,000, there's a scrutiny process here on who do you want to take your money from? You're going to take it from the Ku Klux Klan or the ISIS or things like that. So there's a lot that goes into this, and this is a well thought out document that we should be following. It includes bank statements, the receipts, deposits, the people are handling and accountability and stuff. And one of the reasons why the athletic director was dismissed years ago was the fact that we had donations and we had activity fund accounts and that wasn't accounted for. We had over $400,000 that was not accounted for. So it's an accounting function as well, and we have a responsibility in this book, okay, for the financial oversight of every penny that comes in. And I'm just saying we ought to make sure that we're following the guidance that is there today.
All right, well, we will make sure our attorney has a chance to take a look at this policy and give us any input. That brings us to the end of our agenda, folks, so if I'm open to taking, yes, Mr. Jones?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to make a similar point that dovetailed off the transparency point, if I can have
Yes,
30
feel free to-
seconds.
yes.
Indulge the committee. I just wanted to note, since we just got our books, I assume Mrs. King did all this, the pages that are the individual school pages, which came from Budget Subcommittee and others' input, and I really appreciate the administration putting those together. Maybe we can get those at some point up on the webpage, because I think if the community looks at it, it provides a wealth of information and a snapshot and answers some of the questions that have been raised to the superintendent and other forums about demographics and, equity of spending at various schools. So I really appreciate the work. I assume Mrs. King, you the lead on this, and the superintendent of putting those together. If we can get the community can do it, and also for the community, the fact that the current year bids and contracts are on the website, which again, I think increases both the transparency and accountability for the community to look at those. So I really appreciate the work that Mrs. King and her folks have done on that. So just want to take that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do I have a motion? Yes, Mr.
please.
Mudge. Yes, Mr. Mudge.
We didn't address unfinished business and the financial reports.
No, we did not address them. So, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, so moved. Second?
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
We're not going to,
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries.
not going to address the reports?
No, there are reports.
How about the accuracy of the reports?